8 women dead, no justice, the Jeff Davis 8 mystery that still haunts a town. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. Jennings, Louisiana. A small town tucked in the heart of Jefferson Davis Parish. One blinking stoplight, a few gas stations, rusting rail lines cutting through the bayou. Everyone knows everyone. Nothing big ever happens here until the bodies started turning up. It began in 2005. A young woman named Loretta Chison Lewis was found floating in a canal outside town. Her body was bloated, her family devastated. The police chalked it up to drugs and street life. But in small towns, whispers travel faster than truth. Some said she had been seen with police officers before she died. A few months later, another body, Ernestine Marie Daniels Patterson, found in another canal, not far from where Loretta was discovered. Same signs, same silence from law enforcement. 2 dead women in a matter of months. The town should have been panicking, but Jennings had seen things before. Drug overdoses, bar fights turned deadly. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But the coincidences didn't stop. Over the next 4 years, the number climbed to 8. 8 women, all known to each other. Some were cousins. Some shared the same drug dealers. Others had lived in the same rundown motels. All were involved in drugs, sex work, or had connections to both. And they all turned up dead in swamps, canals, and fields around Jennings. Loretta, Ernestine, Kristen, Whitney, Laconia, Crystal, Brittany, and Nicole. The town started calling them the Jeff Davis 8. These weren't random killings. The victims weren't strangers to the police. In fact, some had been informants. Some had confided in friends about things they'd seen, things involving law enforcement. There were whispers of parties, of police showing up at drug houses, of girls threatened into silence. But no arrests came. The media didn't pick up the story right away. Local journalists started digging, though, and what they found was darker than anyone expected. Records went missing, evidence destroyed, witnesses scared silent. One woman, the sister of a victim, claimed a deputy had warned her to stop asking questions before you end up like your sister. Still, the killings stopped in 2009. And just like that, silence fell again. But people hadn't forgotten, especially not the families. Some of them had started pushing back, talking to reporters, begging the FBI to take over the case, demanding justice in candlelight vigils and Facebook groups. Nothing moved. Jennings is a place where the past clings to everything. Old oak trees, empty diners, broken window frames. The town feels stuck, haunted by the ghosts of 8 women who deserved better. A journalist named Ethan Brown came down to Jennings after hearing about the case. He wasn't from there. He didn't have ties. That made him dangerous to someone. Ethan began to pull at the thread. And what unraveled shocked even the most cynical observers. He found that many of the victims were tied not only to each other, but also to a web of drug distribution, law enforcement misconduct, and systemic corruption. It wasn't just a string of unsolved murders. It was a town built on secrets. He interviewed former cops, survivors, and witnesses who had been ignored. He found tapes, records, even confessions that had never been followed up. And most chilling of all, multiple suspects. Not one killer, not 2, but possibly a network of people using power, influence, and silence as weapons. Theories started forming. Was it a serial killer targeting vulnerable women? Or was it a cover-up? A system erasing its mistakes one body at a time? Some believed the women had seen too much, heard things they shouldn't, talked to the wrong people. Others believed they were sacrificed, pawns in a bigger, dirtier game. Jennings locals were split. Some thought it best to leave the past buried. Others feared they were being watched. One man said his house was broken into after he spoke to investigators. Another woman went missing after talking to a journalist. The deeper you go into Jennings, the more twisted the story becomes. The town isn't just haunted by what happened. It's infected by it. And the worst part? No one has ever been held accountable. No charges, no convictions, no official explanation. Just 8 women, all dead, all forgotten by a system that should have protected them. This is just the beginning. What happened in Jennings wasn't random. It wasn't isolated. It was part of something bigger, something darker. To the outside world, they were just names, faces on missing posters, victims in headlines. But to their families, friends, and anyone who truly looked, the Jeff Davis 8 were more than statistics. They were daughters, mothers, sisters. Real people with stories, struggles, and dreams that never got the chance to grow. Let's start with Loretta Chison Lewis. She was 28, a mother. Loretta had battled addiction for years, bouncing between motels and friends' couches. People in Jennings say she was kind, but troubled. The kind of woman who'd give you her last cigarette, even if she had nothing else. A few weeks before she was found dead in a canal, she'd been trying to get clean. She told her mother she wanted to turn her life around. Then came Ernestine Patterson, just 30 when she died. Soft-spoken. She had 2 children and a smile that lit up rooms. She worked odd jobs, kept to herself, and, like Loretta, struggled with drug use. Rumors swirled that she'd witnessed something she wasn't supposed to. Some said she told people about what she saw. Others said she was silenced for it. Kristen Gary Lopez was only 21. She was friends with many of the other victims. She bounced around from place to place, and in her final months, she stayed with another victim, Whitney I. Du Bois. Kristen's body was found in 2007, in water, badly decomposed. The police never explained how she died, just that she did. Whitney I. was 26. She had a young daughter. Her family remembers her as a sweet girl, though the streets hardened her. Whitney I.'s murder struck fear in Jennings. She was the 4th woman to turn up dead, 4 deaths in less than 2 years. No one in law enforcement gave any answers, just vague mentions of drugs and lifestyles. Laconia Muggy Brown, a nickname everyone in town knew. She was only 23. Laconia had her share of run-ins with the law, but she was known to be funny, fiercely loyal, and brave. She'd been in and out of jail, and people say she knew more than she let on. In fact, before her death, she allegedly told someone, "I ain't scared to talk. If they want to come for me, let them." 2 weeks later, she was dead. Then there was Crystal Shea Benoit Zeno. She was different, a little older, 24 at the time of her death. Her family said she had been terrified in her final weeks. She felt she was being watched. She started carrying a knife. She wanted out of Jennings, out of the streets, out of the danger. But she never made it. Her body was found in September 2008. Brittany Gary was just 17, the baby of the group. She'd grown up watching the others. Some were her cousins, others her friends. Brittany looked up to them and paid the ultimate price. Her mom said Brittany was struggling with grief over Whitney I.'s death. They were best friends. Days before Brittany vanished, she told a friend she thought someone was following her. Her body was found in November 2008. Nicole Guillory was the last. She died in 2009. Like the others, Nicole had ties to many of the victims. In fact, she was reportedly related to one of them. Her body was found alongside Interstate 10, dumped like trash. 8 women, all dead, all connected, not just by lifestyle but by real relationships. Shared trauma, shared knowledge, and possibly shared secrets. Here's what makes it even darker. Several of these women were informants for the police. That means they were giving information, names, activities, drug deals to law enforcement in exchange for protection. But that protection never came. Kristen and Loretta reportedly informed on the same people. Laconia allegedly told police about a party involving drugs, sex, and law enforcement. Brittany, even at 17, had started speaking with authorities. It wasn't just what they knew. It was who knew they knew. There were mentions in police reports of a local pimp known to associate with several victims. Some accounts say he was also close to local law enforcement. He threw parties, supplied drugs. He allegedly filmed women. Some of those videos, they disappeared, like evidence, like case files. Ethan Brown, the journalist who dug into the case, uncovered statements suggesting some of these women had witnessed each other's murders. That's how close they were. One woman would vanish. Another would say, "I saw her last." Then she'd disappear too. As a domino effect, dead witnesses can't talk. And the ones left alive? Too scared. Families were shattered. Most didn't get answers. Many didn't even get autopsy reports. Just silence. A few staged protests, but Jennings is small. It doesn't take much for a protest to become a target. The pattern is chilling. All the women were white. All were from the same rough part of town. All had criminal records. All were easy to overlook, especially if you wanted to. And in Jennings, a place where corruption hung in the air like swamp heat, they were ignored. But they were human. They laughed. They cried. They wanted more. They loved. And now they're gone. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Jennings, Louisiana. Population, 10,000. A town where everybody knows everybody. Where secrets don't stay buried, unless someone wants them buried deep. By 2009, 8 women were dead. The town should have been in a frenzy. It should have been swarming with FBI agents, crime scene tape, nightly press conferences. Instead, nothing. A few short statements. Some vague mentions of drugs, lifestyle choices, and maybe a serial killer. Then silence. And that silence said everything. From the start, the investigation into the Jeff Davis 8 was flawed. At best, it was lazy. At worst, it was something far more sinister. Let's begin with the Jefferson Davis Parish Sheriff's Office. They were the ones in charge. The ones who controlled the evidence. The ones who responded first when a body turned up. But here's the thing. They kept making the same mistakes. Scene after scene wasn't preserved. Bodies were moved before coroners arrived. Evidence, if collected at all, was poorly stored or went missing entirely. Key interviews weren't recorded. Witnesses weren't followed up on. It looked less like incompetence and more like sabotage. Take Loretta Lewis, the first victim. Her body was found in a canal. There were bruises, possible signs of struggle. But no official cause of death was ever released. Why? Because, according to the sheriff's office, the body was too decomposed. That same excuse was used for nearly all 8 victims. Decomposition. Can't say how they died. But families weren't buying it. Neither were independent experts. Several coroners disagreed. There were signs, injuries, clues, but no one pursued them. Then came the leaks. Crime scene photos, autopsy reports, internal memos. Somehow, private documents kept ending up in the hands of locals and journalists. One of those journalists was Ethan Brown. He wasn't from Jennings. He was an outsider, but he saw what was happening. The dead women, the failed investigations, the pattern of silence. Brown came to town and started digging. What he found was explosive. Evidence had vanished. Witness statements had been altered. Key suspects had ties to the sheriff's office. In one case, Brown found out that 2 detectives assigned to the case had actually been partying with some of the victims before their deaths. That's not just a conflict of interest. That's a red flag the size of Louisiana. One detective was even accused of sleeping with one of the victims. Another, according to multiple sources, was seen at a gathering where drugs were used and filmed. Some of those tapes, gone. Brown also learned that multiple women had reported being harassed by law enforcement, that they were told not to talk, that if they did, they might end up like the others. It wasn't just whispers in the streets. It was a systemic rot inside the department. To be fair, the sheriff's office did eventually request help from the FBI. But even that came with issues. The FBI created a task force, but local officers were still involved. That meant the very people who might be suspects were sitting in on strategy meetings. Imagine trying to solve a murder with the killer in the room. The case went nowhere. No arrests, no charges, just theories. At one point, a local man named Frankie Richard became the main suspect. He was a known drug dealer and pimp. Several of the women had connections to him. He denied everything. Richard claimed he knew the girls but didn't hurt them. He blamed the police, said they were trying to use him as a scapegoat, that they were just as involved, if not more. Strangely, evidence against him kept disappearing. One witness recanted. Another died. At least 2 women who claimed Richard was involved were later found dead themselves. Coincidence? Or cleanup? Here's what Ethan Brown uncovered. Frankie Richard had connections to the sheriff's office. He was a known informant. That meant he gave them intel, and they protected him in return. So when he got too close to the truth, did they pull back? Or did they help cover his tracks? The truth is, the investigation was never built to succeed. Files went missing. Evidence was mishandled. Internal politics poisoned every step. And then there was the culture. Jennings wasn't a town that welcomed outsiders. And it definitely didn't welcome people asking too many questions. Families who pushed too hard were ignored or intimidated. Journalists were followed. Locals who spoke out found their homes vandalized. People were scared. In a place like Jennings, fear keeps things quiet. But silence isn't justice. 8 women were killed. Their stories were erased. Their voices buried. And the people meant to protect them, they failed. Behind closed doors, Jennings wasn't just quiet. It was boiling. There were whispers about corruption, about cover-ups, about something bigger than just a failing sheriff's office. Whispers that reached City Hall. Mayor Terry Guillory was no stranger to scandal. Before he was mayor, he'd been a warden at the local jail. Rumors followed him like shadows. Whispers that he had relationships with female inmates. That he looked the other way when drugs were smuggled in. That certain people, connected people, were always protected. Guillory denied everything, but his name kept popping up. When the bodies of the Jeff Davis 8 were found, locals noticed something odd. Who showed up at the scenes? Guillory, even when it wasn't his jurisdiction. Why was a mayor showing up at crime scenes in the middle of the night? Some say he was helping. Others say he was controlling the narrative, controlling the people, controlling what got out and what stayed buried. City council meetings turned tense. The families of the victims demanded answers. Why weren't more resources being used? Why weren't outside investigators given full access? Why was everything so secretive? The answers? We're doing all we can. We can't comment on an ongoing investigation. Stonewall after stonewall. Then came the tapes. Leaked video recordings. Blurry, shaky, but chilling. Women alive at the time talking about what they knew. Naming names. Describing abuse. Some named cops. Some named city officials. Some even said the deaths weren't random, but part of a cleanup. One woman in the tape said, "They're getting rid of the ones who know too much." Days later, she was dead. Overdose, they said. Just another statistic. But the timing? Too perfect. Too clean. Too convenient. Then came the money trail. Jennings wasn't a rich town, but drugs flowed like water. Meth, crack, pills. And someone was profiting. Locals believed there was an unofficial alliance. Dealers worked with dirty cops. Money changed hands. Protection was handed out. If you were part of the circle, you were safe. If you weren't, you disappeared. Some of the Jeff Davis 8 victims were said to be informants. If true, that changes everything. It means they were killed not just randomly, but intentionally, because they talked to the wrong people. Or worse, the right ones. Journalist Ethan Brown wasn't done. He filed Freedom of Information Act requests. He met with families, tracked down old contacts. Every path led deeper into a web of lies. A web that didn't stop at the sheriff's office. It reached City Hall, the local courthouse, the business community, and even federal offices. Jennings wasn't just a town with a crime problem. It was a town fueled by secrets. Secrets protected by powerful men. Secrets worth killing for. In Chapter 5, we'll uncover the most shocking theories that still haunt Jennings. Was it a serial killer? A criminal conspiracy? Or something even darker? And why, after nearly 2 decades, has no one paid the price? Because when power protects itself, justice dies quietly. It's been nearly 2 decades. 8 women, 8 families destroyed, and still no arrests. But what if this wasn't a failure to solve a crime? What if it was never meant to be solved? Let's talk theories. Because Jennings, Louisiana is drowning in them. Some believe a serial killer is responsible. A twisted predator preying on vulnerable women, picking them off one by one. There's pattern. All 8 victims were women. All had ties to drugs or sex work. All were found in remote, watery areas around Jefferson Davis Parish. Some believe the killer used this consistency as a signature, to show the town who was in control, to taunt them. But if this was one man, why no trail? Why no physical evidence? Why no suspect matching all 8 deaths? Serial killers crave attention. They slip up. They leave trophies. They write letters to newspapers. This one, nothing. Which leads to theory 2. A network. A group of men with something to hide. Connected by business, law enforcement, politics. Using their power to silence, to bury, to eliminate. In this version, the Jeff Davis 8 weren't random victims. They were threats. Women who had seen too much. Who had talked too much. Who had become liabilities. And liabilities get removed, one by one. This theory is chilling, not because it sounds cinematic, but because the evidence fits. Think about it. How did the same mistakes happen in every case? Lost evidence, poorly secured scenes, missing coroner reports, unrecorded interviews, reassigned detectives, muzzled witnesses. And how did those leaks, tapes, files, internal documents vanish just as quickly as they appeared? Who had that kind of reach? Then there's theory 3, both. A serial predator operating with indirect support from a corrupt system. Someone who committed the murders, but was protected because he served a purpose, or had leverage, or knew too many secrets himself. Journalist Ethan Brown explored this idea in detail. He believed the killer wasn't just someone on the fringes, but someone inside the system, a person who moved freely, someone familiar to the victims, someone they may have trusted. He wasn't hunting strangers. He was hunting acquaintances. That's why they got in his car. That's why they weren't reported missing until it was too late. Now, let's look at the victims again. Loretta Lewis, Ernestine Daniels Patterson, Kristen Gary Lopez, Whitney I. Du Bois, Laconia Muggy Brown, Crystal Shea Benoit Zeno, Brittany Gary, Nicole Guillory. Different women, different lives, but all with overlapping connections to each other, to law enforcement, to local drug circles. And more than one was rumored to have acted as informants. If true, that's a death sentence in the wrong town. Then there's the lack of federal action. Why didn't the Department of Justice take over completely? Why wasn't a full federal investigation launched? Was it jurisdiction? Was it resources? Or was it pressure? Because here's the quiet part no one says out loud. Some towns aren't meant to be exposed. Some secrets are too dangerous. Not just to local power, but to state and federal players too. Once the rot spreads far enough, no one wants to be the one to dig it up. And so, silence. Even today, the families of the Jeff Davis 8 wait. Wait for justice. Wait for answers. Wait for someone to care. Their daughters aren't headlines anymore. They aren't breaking news. They're whispers. The kind of whispers that used to echo through Jennings streets late at night. She knew something. She talked. She was next. But here's the truth. These women weren't just victims. They were warnings. Their deaths told a story. About power. About silence. About what happens when evil isn't punished, but protected. So where does that leave us? With questions. Who killed the Jeff Davis 8? Why were they targeted? How far does the corruption reach? And maybe the most haunting question of all, will anyone ever be held accountable? The answer for now is no. Because in Jennings, justice isn't just blind. It's been gagged, chained, buried in the same swamps where those women were found. But you've heard their story now. And maybe, just maybe, that's the first step. Because secrets only survive when no one's looking. And we're all watching now. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.